it's probably best to plan ahead and don't wait until budgets are finalized, decisions are made to come with your request, because very likely what you might hear is, we have, used up the whole budget and there's nothing I can do except wait for the next cycle. Be sure to be strategic about how you plan for those conversations. And you can also make sure that this is an ongoing thing. It doesn't have to be one-off.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Wise and Shine by the Financial Coconut. This is Alex Lowe, your growth mindset coach, and I am joined with Dawn today.
Hi everyone, it's Dawn, Budget Babe, and today we have a really exciting topic because to start off 2025, we're going to talk about something that Asians usually struggle a lot with, which is how do you negotiate your salary, how do you prove your worth, and how do you set boundaries in the workspace. So everyone wants more money.
That's
but
true.
Yet on the other end, the companies also have their own KPIs to not spend so much on employee salaries because they need to keep everything in balance. Otherwise, their own financial go out of whack. The company may not even survive if they are not managing their costs well. So how can we then strike a balance and make it a win-win situation for both the company and the employee? Now, representing us would be on this side of the employees, but to hear from the company's perspective, we have invited two lovely experts to share their views. And we have on set
Suhila. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I have corporate compensation experience for almost 20 years. I worked in various industries, including big tech. And I now do compensation advisory, helping senior professionals navigate their pay conversation. So I've been on the other side of the table, and hopefully I'll be able to share some practical tips on such an important topic.
Thank you for being on.
You're going to give away our secrets, right? We want those secrets. And joining Suhila is Nina, whom some of you might recognize as a familiar face as she has appeared on some of our previous episodes. But for those of you who are watching this for the first time, Nina, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nina. I'm CEO and founder of Elleuminate, a coaching platform enabling women to lead and live courageously. One of the things you can expect today is how to courageously ask for what you deserve, together with my friend here, Suhila. One of the things that you might not know about me is I've got 20 years of experience in HR and talent. And so I've been on the other side negotiating with candidates like yourselves out there who are looking to get the best pay for yourselves. So together, we are going to share our secrets.
Thank you. And I think that, with this conversation, there's actually an art to it when we talk about negotiation, but there's also a science to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's dabble a little bit into that art and science. And the first question I would like to ask is, what is the psychology behind candidates finding it so difficult to actually ask for higher compensation?
So I think the reason why it's so difficult to negotiate salary is because there's a lot of internal barriers, the psychological side of things. So people fear rejection. People fear judgment. What if they think I'm greedy? What if they think it's aggressive? What if they think I'm selfish? So if you think about it, self-doubt is really the main obstacle to negotiating your salary. And, research has showed that when you think about negotiation, it activates the same neuropathways as physical pain. So it's literally a scary thing. It's intimidating. And for this reason, many people actively avoid it.
So there's that fear, that constant fear when it comes to negotiating for salary.
Yeah, and people tend to think about the worst case scenario. What happens if they rescind the offer? What happens if they don't want to work with me anymore? What happens if the trust is affected? But if you think about it, the probability of this happening is extremely low. I think there is this tendency of people to see negotiation as confrontational. But if you think about it, it's more of a collaborative process. People coming together to find solution, to do some problem solving, as opposed to one side wins and the other side loses.
I like that. So it's not about conflict, right? Or it's more about collaboration and coming together to find that solution. Nina, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that Suhila had touched on was fear. And being courageous to ask for what you want means you also have to be very vulnerable to ask for what you want. Again, putting yourself in the shoes of what if this doesn't turn out the way that it's supposed to, or I want it to? And that's exactly it. The vulnerability, we're not taught to be vulnerable. We're taught to show a certain side, be aggressive, but we're not shown that we can be safe, especially with someone whom we may not know, a new employer. Do I feel safe in this environment to vulnerably ask for what I want? So absolutely, couldn't agree more with that.
And before we go into the how, which I'm sure every listener and audience will want to know, let's talk about the when. Is there ever a right time to ask for your salary increasement, or is there a wrong time to be asking for it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think it goes back to your point earlier. There is the art and there is the science, right? The art is probably more the psychological side of things, the emotional side of things. The science is really from a practical standpoint, when is the best time to ask for a raise? Well, many of our listeners today might be going through their yearly compensation cycle and yearly compensation conversation where you are told how much increase you are getting, how much bonus, etc. Well, this is a pay conversation. If you expect a positive outcome, it's probably best to plan ahead and don't wait until budgets are finalized, decisions are made to come with your request, because very likely what you might hear is, we have, used up the whole budget and there's nothing I can do except wait for the next cycle. So be sure to plan ahead. Be sure to be strategic about how you plan for those conversations. And you can also make sure that this is an ongoing thing. It doesn't have to be one-off. Like you said, if you have this emotional safety with your manager, make sure to trigger those regular conversations. And it doesn't have to be solely around compensation. It can be around your performance, how you're doing. If you're a new employee, discuss the feedback that you got, any leadership praise that you received, or from the clients, for example. And this is something that keeps the conversation ongoing and sets you up for success when comes the time to really ask for a concrete raise.
Right. Nina, would you say that is the same? Because you have worked on the other side before. Is it true that during that compensation cycle, which usually takes even in my company, we're going through that compensation reviews right now, it's going to last for about a month. Would you say that during that period is when the company has the biggest flexibility to gauge and adjust the budget if needed, and anyone who misses that golden timing could potentially have to wait for the next opportunity?
Yes and no. So I'm going to give you an example. And let's take a little bit of a step back to think of the promotion cycle. Some companies have a promotion cycle of once a year. Other companies have a promotion cycle of twice a year. So first, it's understanding where's the promotion cycle. The second thing is I'm going to share this tip for all of you. It's called recency bias. And it actually works towards the favor if you are thinking of asking for a promotion. So the conversations around salary, conversations about promotion, they should be an ongoing thing. It's the same as asking for feedback, it's the same as asking for initiative. But knowing when those cycles are and the closer you are to it, the more strategic you have to play. Now, let's take the assumption of a promotion cycle, and let's say the announcements are going to be in January, but the decision would have been made in December. When we're in the room discussing who gets what when, we'll always look at the last 3 months and what projects that this person has contributed within the last 3 months. Sometimes it's 6 months, but the more recent, the more closer. I will tell you, based on my experience, having managed teams and also being in the rooms where we look at who to promote, who to give extra to at that point in time, it's based on what have they contributed. And the recency bias, how recently they have contributed and to what impact they have made, increases the chances of that increment or that promotion.
That top of mind recall.
Right?
Exactly.
And who set that room and that table? Would that be the HR, the budget holders, as well as the different managers who have to speak for their teams?
Yes, absolutely. So in my experience, it's always been the global leadership team. So we then look at, okay, these are all the people, this is what they've contributed, this is the amount that we have, plus minus, and there's a budget. Now, I want to come back to the question that you asked, which is around, is there any flexibility on the budget? The budget's set, right? So an organization would have a project budget, would have a personnel budget, would have a promotion budget. So sometimes these budgets are considered as 3 different buckets. Sometimes they roll up into one. And it's also back to the flexibility of the organization and of the department to see, okay, if we can take this money from this project budget somewhere, or if we can take this money from a personnel budget somewhere. I think it really depends. However, there are guidelines. There is a range usually, right, that we look at in terms of, is a salary increase between 2% to 4%, or is a promotion increase between 8 to 12%?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I would just to add on, so different companies might have different approaches to compensation and different approaches to, the number of buckets that they have or the flexibility that you just mentioned about. It's extremely important as an employee, which is something you cannot do when you are, applying for a job. But if you are an existing employee of the company, try to understand how compensation works. How are the range determined? How often are they reviewed? Where does the promotion budget come from? How often do we have promotion cycles? This information is absolutely key because ultimately, this is what's going to help you gain a certain edge when it comes to negotiating your pay because you understand how things work.
I guess the problem though is that this information is not easily made available to employees, right? Like you probably need to find out from someone, have an insider to get that information from. So who should employees go and make best friends with in order to get this information? Would that be HR? Would that be TA? Would that be compensation and benefits? Who should they go to?
I think someone in the company, someone in the company who has been there a couple of years should have some insight to provide, right?
But they may or may not have the right insights as well if they don't have.
That is true. Yeah.
So who would be the right people?
Again, I think it really depends on the company culture and how transparent they are on pay. There is a very encouraging trend and promising trend that companies are moving towards pay transparency. This is particularly true in the US, where they are now, companies are mandated by law to officially, publicly publish the ranges. We're not there in Asia yet.
Yes,
but
we're not.
There is this trend. It's coming in Europe, and eventually it will come in Asia. But there are many companies where managers are trained and equipped to have pay conversations with their team members. And therefore, they would have a high-level understanding on how things work. So even your hiring manager would be a great person to talk to. And then obviously, if you have access to HR, it's even better. But you could talk to your peers, you could talk to your network, you could talk. I guess at the end of the day, what really matters is that you have an open mind, that you stay curious, and you really work on that information gathering process.
So I'm going to be the devil's advocate here and confess that I've been in the manager role and I've not been given this training. Like literally, I'm always speaking for my team. I want to promote the best people in my team because I don't want to lose them either. And when they ask me, I'll be like, okay, I'll fight for your increment. I'll put in a good word for your promotion. But I have zero idea about how the compensation cycles are like until I finally decide that I want to ask for an increment myself. Then what I would do is I would go and find like the HR, or in some cases in Asian companies, because it's not that transparent. What I've done previously is I would go to either the MD, the general manager, or whoever the biggest shot in the room for that country would be. And then I'll try to find out this information. Sometimes it's HR, sometimes HR is less willing to give this information. But for anyone, let's say if we were to remove that trend and transparency, we take it that it is in a very Asian senior management culture where they like to keep all these things hush-hush. Who should the employee go and find for these insights?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I'm going to take a guess, okay, that 99% of companies don't actually train their managers on how to do this. And I think the companies that we work for are very far and few of the managers that actually can have these kind of conversations and actually are willing to have these conversations. I think there's a will and skill.
Because there's always that situation where, if I say the wrong thing, then I'm going to overcommit on something and somebody's going to say, hey, so-and-so said this.
Exactly.
And then that fella's going to get into trouble.
Exactly. 100%. And so you're absolutely right on this. It's like, okay, do I have the courage to stick to what I've actually shared? Do I know enough of this topic to be able to have the conversation? And if I don't know enough about this topic, am I willing to make myself vulnerable to say, can you actually go and speak to HR about this? Or can I find out, give me a moment, can I go and find out from HR?
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I would say, firstly, as a manager, we need to be very careful is our energy, right? So a lot of the times we are in so many meetings, So most managers tend to be very reactive to the situation. So if someone was to come to me and say, boss, I want to talk to you about my salary. What's the promotion cycle? I'm like, wait, what? Like my brain might not be there, right? So I think the first thing as a manager is watch out for that. The second thing is for the person coming up. I would definitely recommend the first conversation is with your manager, because that's the person you should trust, rightly. And how to approach that conversation is to give a heads up. Like, would you mind when you have 5 minutes to explain to me how this works? And I think this is very important, especially at the very start when you first join a company, to understand that in the same way as how you navigate corporate politics, right? Like
So, in other words, don't ambush Nina. And don't ambush your manager. Give them a heads up.
exactly. And so it's the same as understanding corporate politics or even making a sale. You need to know who's the decision maker. You need to know who's the influencer, right? So all of these things are really, really important.
Okay, so question here, right? In my own situation, I've not been able to advocate sometimes for my team members because even though I'm the main manager, the decision doesn't sit with me. So all I can do is to push it forward. But in a situation where the employee does not have a manager who is on their side, what can they do? I'll share an example to put this in context. Previously, in one of the firms that I work at, I never felt like my manager was my advocate. But it's very clear to me, and I think as an individual, we know when someone is standing for us versus someone's just like, oh yeah, I just got to manage you because you were thrown to me, And I felt that very distinctly with this particular manager. When I was given more work, I did really well, by the way. There were like a few of us in the team. I was definitely the best performing. And I'm not just saying this because it's from me, but I literally had the statistics and evidence to show it. The numbers spoke for itself. But every conversation to get my pay increase fell flat. Later on, I then realized, and again, because in Asia, pay transparency is not at its fullest, I realized later on that my other teammate, who was newer than me and had less work than me and less achievements, had a higher salary than me. And obviously, I was not happy. My that colleague also told me, like, you're being paid less. You should be asking for more. So I went to have that conversation with my hiring manager because that's only right? My manager said, oh yeah, and she kind of brushed it off, gave me a lot of excuses. And she said like she'll talk to HR, but I never knew if she even had that conversation. Later on, this probably took about almost a year later, she left. The moment she left, my immediate supervisor became like the C-level because that layer is gone, right? I went and asked straight, and I got it. And it made me wonder, like, did my manager even have a conversation? Because what I got was a huge jump from what I had asked her for. I asked her for just a $1,000 increase in salary. It's not even 20%, by the way. But I didn't get it. But when she was removed and I went straight, I got a much bigger increment. So going back to the question, right? For anyone who might find themselves in this situation where they feel like, I don't think my manager is speaking for me, but yet I'm also very concerned about politics. Because if people find out that I bypassed my manager and went straight to HR or C-suite to ask, my manager may then blow that up and make it against me. How can one navigate this delicate situation?
I think it's a very tricky question, but it's an absolutely fair one because, of course, there are instances where your manager may not advocate for you. But before you really confidently assert that this is the case, you need to also understand what else is happening. I'm not talking specifically about your case because it's very obvious that your manager, your ex-manager, had a clear role to play in your compensation level. But in other cases, it could be, your position in the range, for example. You could be performing extremely well, but because your position in the range is already very high for the role that you are slotted in, then the room for base pay improvements is very little. And so there's not much that can be done there. There could also be internal equity issues. Other peers are performing as well as you, or they are, on the same job responsibilities and scope, and they are paid less than you. So increasing further your pay would create a bigger discrepancy, and we don't want that because you were in a position to see how it feels when someone that's doing less or the same thing is paid more. And companies are trying to move away from that. So managing compensation in a company, it's about balancing market benchmarks, internal equity, budget constraints. There's a ton of things that need to be considered. And so it's not always because your boss doesn't want to advocate for yourself, for yourself. Before I let Nina answer on that, I just would like to add that there is also a tendency of some people to not know how to self-advocate. And they would expect numbers to speak for themselves. They assume that people would see how well they have been performing, but it's not always true. And if you think about it, if you are not able to advocate for yourself, then how do you expect your manager to do it for you? So that's the reason why I think it's extremely important to document your achievement, build the case, make sure you quantify the achievements, have that conversation with manager. And then there could be a possibility that they are not the best person to advocate for you, but you have some tools and techniques that you can use to help bypass that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything that you've just said. I would also add that I think visibility is really important. So you have your manager, your direct manager. You also need to be in the visible eyes of the people above. In this case, you said the one layer was the C-suite. I would have actually built more conversation with the C-suite. Even though it's like in passing, I'll find opportunities to be in the same room, not necessarily in a meeting room, but in the same lift, like, or in the coffee, you see the person coming in. And I say this a bit shamelessly, right? Because at the end of the day, if we only rely on one pillar and that pillar disappears or that pillar is not very strong.
Not fighting for you.
Yeah, and not fighting for you, you can't put all your eggs in that basket.
Especially for larger companies, right? I mean,
Especially
with
for
100
larger
over employees,
companies.
the CEO is not
100%.
going to remember you or
Yes.
know who you are.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think this is such a crucial thing to do, to be able to put yourself out there a little bit. And one of the things that she mentioned earlier was documenting your achievements. I have a file that I keep.
Tell us about this compliment file.
So this compliment file, basically anyone who says, wow, you did so good. I love that you added this. You were so thoughtful. Something even so small, I screenshot them and I put them in my compliment file. And so at the end of the day, what I would do is I would take that to help me also build a story around my own personal annual review, right, for the company, as a compensation review, so that I can actually go and say, oh yeah, we did this project. This was the testimonials or the reviews that's actually been given, and so this was the impact. And because of that, I'm advocating for myself to tell my boss this story about, hey, this is what happened. I just wanted to show you. I forward things on. Whether it's for me or for the team. And, at the end of the day, it's something very, very important to do to drive that visibility. One thing I would say is if you have a manager, the way to actually get to the top of your manager's mind is to manage them, not have them manage you. I think that's the flip I would make if I was an employee.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm. But even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Yep, now back to the show.
I think that's a great tip, for everyone to listen in as well. But so this reminds me of someone that was in my team that was also asking for compensation, and she literally had screenshots of and documented from day one to now, and I've just got my master's, so therefore I should get this amount of salary increment, right? But then, of course, as her manager and the CEO of the company, I was like, okay, but all those things did not exactly translate into commercial, gains for the company, or at least we're not there yet. But I mean, she still got her increment at the end of the day, but not what she wanted. But she was very, very persistent, and she had all of this evidence, right, that she documented. So I guess brownie points for all of that. This brings me to another question, right, which is off-season compensation. So if someone is asking for an increment somewhere in the middle of the year where it's not time for review yet, what are the sorts of things that the company needs to be considering to really ensure that this person gets what this person is asking for? Otherwise, this person might just, leave for another competitor? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And it's a black box for a lot of people. Off cycle is quite tricky and really varies from one company to the other. I would say that the biggest the company, then likely the more structured they would be from a compensation processes standpoint. And so the likelihood of an off cycle budget to be there is relatively low, unless there is a very high attrition risk on the person, and that having this person leave the company would cost very much to the company. Replacement would be long. It would possibly affect the company strategy, the company revenue. And I guess in that case, the company might be ready to review this person's salary, provided there is budget available. But in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that asking for an off-cycle salary increase, you really need to have a case to do that. Be very sure that you are severely underpaid. And if you have some critical skills, then obviously this is something that can help you with that negotiation process.
Okay, so what if, right, the employee comes along and says that, I need a salary increment, I know it's not the time, but somebody is offering me 30% and they're willing to pay me to go even the whole gardening leave.
I've done that before. In fact, that was like
So
I think
high in
the
demand.
second time that I asked for a pay increment, and my direct manager was the MD himself. So I had a bit of it, I had things on my side, right? So I went to him and I said, I just had an offer from your competitor. I'm not gonna say who, but I gave enough hints so that he could guess. And I said, and in all transparency, I'm gonna tell you that they offered me a 30% increase. I'm tempted because I'm at the stage of my life where money is important, but I really enjoy working in this firm and with you. So I wanted to be honest with you and ask if there is any opportunity for us to review my compensation again. And it got me more than the 30% increase.
Sounds like you have great experience negotiating
It was only
salaries.
one time. But it was legitimate, right? But I can imagine on the other end, someone could be bluffing.
Yeah, what if? What sort of internal controls do you have to sort of like assess whether that person
how
plays
do you
a bluff?
tell?
Well, I guess if you say that the competitor and maybe the bosses know each other anyway, he's just going to pick up his phone and say, hey, did you really speak to this person?
It's a small word, isn't
Yes,
it?
Yeah.
exactly.
It's smaller in Singapore. I will share my experience as a manager because this has happened multiple times. And I think for me, I always throw back the question. At the end of the day, I ask them, okay, what is it that I'm not doing today? That's why you're having a conversation outside. So I get to understand what really is the opportunity and why are they even having the conversation. Because if it's actually my management style or they're not happy or please, by all means, I need to understand what we call walkaway point is.
And if the answer is just, I want more salary.
Then I think we need to have a very different conversation, right? So example, if you say, well, actually it's just a comp issue. Well, if it's just a comp issue, I don't think that's going to be the case that I can offer you today, right? So then please, if it's just money, thank you. But that's not enough for why I need to have someone like that in my team. Because there's always going to be another time that's going to happen, and another time that's going to happen, and another time that's going to happen. It sets precedence for that. At the end of the day, me personally, my management principles is I want to have the performance that I can trust, and the money will come.
Sushila, what's your take?
Yeah, so when I was working as a compensation expert, so basically when someone comes with an offer, HR or the hiring manager would reach out to us and say, can we counter offer? So there's a couple of checks that we need to do. Number one is to check that the employee is not bluffing. So,
So don't lie, guys.
The company could be in a position to ask the other offer, can we see your offer? I mean, if you come to me and you tell me they are giving you X, Y, Z, then might as well share the company name. And if you expect us to align and match, then just share it, So the company can be in a position to do that. If the employee continues to refuse sharing that, it's typically a bit suspicious. One thing that we also like to do as compensation is to check, okay, they are offering you a 30% increase, but can we compare apples to apples? Is this a promotion? Like, what's the job level for this role that they are offering you? What's the scope? Because if you are getting an expanded scope, which I cannot offer you here, then I'm very happy for you. Just go ahead and take the job, you know? So depending on the context, depending on the type of role that they're being offered, and I guess this is a very, very important thing that we try to clarify as HR, then we would define how far we are willing to go with our counteroffer.
Right, right. So in that sense, in preparing for that, let's say if someone does not have a counter offer, if you have a legit counter offer, you can use it like I did. Okay, but what if you don't have? Please do not bluff. If your bluff gets
don't.
caught, yeah, that's gonna be even worse. Okay, but let's say someone does not have a counter offer, but would like a salary review and ask for an increment. What research should they do in order to push their case? So I think the typical way that most people do it is go to salary.com.sg, right? Go and find, and then, or maybe even go on the different job listings and see how much is the range that's being offered. Then they benchmark against their own and say, look, this is what the market rate is. I should be paid this amount. Is that sufficient? And is that even accurate?
In my view, I was an individual coming to an organization and say, or even the manager saying, okay, look, this is where I think I'm at. Research is important. Looking at the Indeed, the Glassdoors and all that. One thing I would do is also have conversations with headhunters or recruitment firms just to understand truly like where I stand, because that they have the most up-to-date information. Then I would also look at the company size and the company stage, because a startup might pay very differently from an MNC and would definitely pay very differently from a different industry. So let me give you an example. Airline industry will pay very differently from someone in retail. It's very important to, when we talk about comparing apples to apples, I think that's the key element. And then also understanding what are the insurance plans, the benefits. Maybe someone has only 15 days of annual leave. Maybe, another company has 25 days of annual leave. That's still money at the end of the day, right? So what are we willing to settle for? And where are we at in our stage of our lives? I think that's really important.
What are certain, perks, right, in your experience that would sort of like trump any decision or any offer that is being presented? You mentioned insurance, but what is that perk that you say, well, this is the best, you should just take it, even though you're only getting a 20%, not a 30% increment?
Free lunch. No, I'm joking.
Work from home. I don't think so.
Free coffee every day.
Free coffee. What was the other one? I saw one recently. I thought personal development, like a reimbursement, now is getting quite trendy. Right? I think this is one thing I saw. But I'm going to hold my thoughts until you share.
Yeah, of course. So I think that's an excellent question, because salary, just one piece of the puzzle, right? You need to think about total rewards, the full package, total rewards holistically. It's not only salary, it's also benefits, but it's career opportunities, work environment. There's a ton of things that fall under that umbrella of total rewards. It's important that you understand what are your priorities. What do you value the most? Because the answer to this question that you just asked really depends on which stage are you in your life. So typically someone who has young kids will probably value more time off than someone who is, say, a mid-professional really focused on career acceleration, right? So it's for you, it's your responsibility to define what matters the most for you. And based on that, you can try to see, what are the most valuable benefits and find alignment between your priorities and, the employer needs.
I like that. Not
I
everyone
agree.
is in the same life stage and needing the same things.
Yeah, for me, like in this case, I would definitely take a work from home job with a lower pay. Just because I have kids and I need to be around for them, right? But if you ask me that same question like 7 years ago, no way, man. I'll take whichever pays me the highest. I want to go back full circle to what we talked about right at the start, which is that when we ask for salary and we try to negotiate, there's that fear. So what happens in the worst case scenario if you ask and you get rejected? What should the employee do and how should they react?
I think it's natural and it's human to think about the worst case scenario, but again, it never really happens. Like, what is the probability that your employer doesn't want to work with you anymore? Or I think we need to really stop thinking about that worst
You need a
case
mindset
scenario.
shift. Yeah.
And shift our mindset and reframe it. Reframe rejection as, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Or I didn't get what I wanted, but I planted seed for future salary increases. so that next year or next, semester, when I'm having this conversation with my manager, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm building the foundation. So I think it's extremely important to stop thinking about rejection. And many people don't realize that it's not necessarily a bad thing to negotiate your salary, especially if you are applying for a senior role, a sales role. Employers might see this as business acumen. They might see this as a leadership skill. And the same way you will advocate for yourself, you will be advocating for the company.
That's such a great perspective.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So in other words, like, please don't do you didn't give me my pay increment, I'm out. But you can plant
don't
seed.
be defensive. It's not about you. It's business.
Yeah.
It's a business transaction between you and the company. It's a company decision to invest or not in a certain set of skills, right?
I'm getting a really good script in my mind just hearing you say that. Like, if I was at the other end of the table, in this case, I would then say, but thank you for considering my request at this stage and explaining to me why it cannot be done. I hope we can work together for the next opportunity. And in the meantime, please feel free to let me know what are my gaps or what I need to do to get there so that when the company has money, I hope I'll be the first that you think of to give me that increment. I'll say something like that after
I
hearing
hope you all
say
took that down.
I must type out and copy paste script. Then after that you say budget mate taught me how. Okay, but Nina, is that
100%. Exactly this. Nothing is binary. We are somehow trained through the education is binary. Like, oh, it's not this means it must be that. Right? This is the wrong answer. There's no other negotiation. And I think it's also partially because of how we grew up, right?
Yeah, your math answer wrong means wrong.
Means wrong. Right? However, that being said, when we think of it like, hey, it's not personal, it's just business. I am trading my time for money. What am I willing to walk away from? Back to, I'm willing to walk away from this amount because it's not giving me what I need. I'm not able to work from home. I'm not able to spend time with kids. I'm not able to save more money. And that's okay. The thing to be careful with this, and I'm going to caveat this, is when you hop. You hop every 6 months because the money is better. That short-term win for a long-term loss is not worth it.
At the end of the day, it's not about making more money. It's just about reclaiming your power, setting yourself up for success, being in the driver's seat of your career, and creating the right conditions to thrive in your job. It's really creating job satisfaction. If I'm happy with my pay, I'm going to probably very likely be more satisfied with my job. So it's a win-win for individuals and for companies.
Thank you. So I hope you guys have found this episode useful, and we hope that this catches you when you're going through that golden period and compensation cycle. But if you're seeing this episode because it's off season, well, that's where you start planting seeds and then get your salary increment in the next cycle. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Suhila and Nina, for joining us and sharing your expertise. And Alex, any closing words?
Yes, if you liked what you saw today, do leave your email at our website, www.thefinancialcoconut.com, and stay tuned for more episodes of Wise and Shine from The Financial Coconut.
We'll see you in the next episode. Bye!